20 founding branches in West Eurasia, there's only 7. If we look at Southeast Asia, there's 30. If we look at the Sahel, at northern, look specifically really at the northern part of the Sahel, you've got 11, which is more than either Europe or China, which has only got 7. So that in terms of founding diversity, the most diverse place outside Africa is the Sunda Shelf. It's even more diverse than India. Looking at the vegetation at the time of the exit, approximately, one can see a reason for the differences in diversity in the regions. There's better rainfall in Southeast Asia and the North Sahel and in India than there is anywhere else in the old world outside Africa. So that may explain the great diversity of the founding lineages in Southeast Asia. Of course, later on, some of the lineages from China came south into Southeast Asia. And also some of the Southeast Asian ones went north into China. And that's something one can disentangle. Looking at the indigenous populations of the Malay Peninsula, in terms of these primary founding lineages, we can look at the Orang Asli. They're grouped all together here. There's the 3 groups, the Semang, the Senoi, and the Aboriginal Malay. And 86% of their lineages come from locally founding lineages in the previous diagram. If you break that up a bit, you can see that some of the lineages which are described as coming from the Sunda came from further north in northern mainland Southeast Asia or Indochina. That's this orange disc here. A very small number came from East Asian lineages, 2% here. It's been split up by approximate date of arrival. So there is a certain amount of movement to and fro of these lineages, but the large part of the ancestry of the Orang Asli has always been here since that first founding event around 60,000 years ago or more. If we look at the Malay population as a whole, that figure is nearly 60% for those derived from founding Sunda lineages, whichever part of the Sunda Shelf that is. But if we, so there's 38% derived from founding East Asian lineages. If we break that up, we find that there's yes been a lot of movement north and south down the Malay Peninsula from Indochina and from East Asia. I won't go through all of the dates and ages of these different sections, but essentially there's a lot of local movement, but most of it is confined to Southeast Asia. One of the main drivers of this local movement has been the 3 rapid rises in sea level, worldwide sea level, since 15,000 years ago. And it's not been a gradual movement, increase in sea level. It's each event was very rapid initially and then plateaued off. And the effects of these 3 rapid sea level rises can be seen in the gene trees, because you get extinction events, which means long branches with no twigs, or side branches. They've got lots of mutations but no derived twigs. That's the extinction event. And then following the plateau, you get re-expansions of populations, not just locally but to nearby islands. And so these three sea level rises can be seen in the genetic record. One of the largest of the mitochondrial branches that's found in island Southeast Asia, so-called haplogroup E, just call it E, it evolved on Sunderland from an older haplogroup called M9 at around 23,000 years ago. And between 15,000 and 7,000 years ago, there were three periods of drift, that's extinction, as the area of land halved by three rises in sea level. And these can be seen just in that particular lineage. And these were matched by at least two major expansions after 12,000 years, perhaps evolving from marine adapted populations moving out and expanding locally. And E certainly does expand throughout Southeast Asia over that period. And it expands as far north as Taiwan and west to Malaysia and eastern New Guinea by 6,000 years ago. So in fact, movement into Taiwan precedes any movements out of Taiwan further south. So that's a brief picture of the tree of haplogroup E. You don't need to look at the detail there, but up in the top right, you'll see a heat map of the distribution of haplogroup E, and it includes large parts of island Southeast Asia, but also Taiwan. And this particular move, the extension to Taiwan, is a south-north movement. I mentioned that 15% of all gene lines, mitochondrial gene lines in island Southeast Asia and Taiwan are belonging to haplogroup E, and the founding age in Taiwan was 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. Now there's another mitochondrial DNA branch which has a similar distribution to haplogroup E, but it's gone in a completely different direction. It comes from China into Taiwan and spreads from Taiwan into Southeast Asia. And the spread into Southeast Asia is around 4,000 years ago, which corresponds with the Neolithic, which has been postulated for that period coming out of Taiwan. And now most of the rest of the slides that I'll show relate to two papers that we've had published in Human Genetics this year. So the point of these pictures is to show that we've got a very wide sample base, both for mitochondrial DNA data points. We've also done Y chromosome, and a slightly smaller one for autosomal. That's the nuclear DNA, which is the one that dices and splices at each generation. And also to show all of the large numbers of collaborators in this, which includes a number of people from USA who've been our collaborators for a long time. Now this is a brief overview of the sort of results that one might get from founder analysis, and the point of showing this one is that you've got it's best shown in the Y chromosome, you've got a wiggly line. Now this, in terms of dating, is going backwards from 30,000 to recently, and as you can see, the line goes up and down. These are actually evidences of the extinction followed by expansion. You would get a more smooth line if there was a steady expansion or decline in population. So the wiggly nature of these lines corresponds basically with the events of rapid sea level rise. Looking in a bit more detail at Southeast Asia and the mainland in the late Pleistocene, essentially there are two routes out of mainland East Asia into Southeast Asia, island Southeast Asia as it is now. One is down the Malay Peninsula, which is shown down here on the left, and the other is going down from Taiwan through the Philippines, and both routes have been used. And so to deal with the late Pleistocene first, and that's most relevant to our story here, we have three important lineages which come out of mainland, northern mainland Southeast Asia or Indochina, at around the same time as the Hoabinhian culture is developing in Indochina. And they can be traced right down to Sumatra, arriving there around 11,000 years ago, and maybe a counterpart of the spread of the Hoabinhian and the Sumatra liths, which have been linked with the Hoabinhian culture. Then, in terms of time, a bit later, we have around 15 to 11,000 years ago, movement from China into Taiwan, which is shown bottom left, which is looking basically at movements from China into Taiwan, which are in a buff color, and the black line represents movements from Southeast Asia into Taiwan through the Philippines. Then around, E starts at around 23,000 years ago, but there are massive expansions of E in Southeast Asia after 12,000 years ago, and that big blue line there going up into the Philippines is a representation of that. And if we again look at that heat map of the distribution of E, that shows that movement. Now, there is an archaeological counterpart to the early and mid-Holocene genetic expansions of E in island Southeast Asia, and that is the flake and blade industry, which I think originates in Sulawesi, but spreads into the Philippines, and then finally reaches Taiwan at around 5,000 years ago.